In the quiet village of Ndala, love grew where it was never meant to. Amari, the son of a poor farmer, and Zola, the proud daughter of the village chief, met in secret under the trees, whispering promises the world would never allow. Their love was pure but dangerous, for everyone knew the chief's daughter could never belong to a farmer. Still, Amari carried hope like fire in his chest. Every day after the fields, he worked harder, saving coins in a small clay pot, dreaming of a silver ring that would prove his love was strong enough to last forever. The villagers watched from a distance, some with pity, some with envy, all with sharp tongues ready to spread whispers. To them, Amari was reaching too high, daring to touch what tradition had already claimed. Yet, blinded by love, he believed that hearts mattered more than names or titles. Night after night, he counted his coins by the dim glow of a lantern, imagining the day he would kneel before Zola and ask her to be his wife. But in the shadows, others were watching. The elders, proud and stern, spoke of honor, of rules written long before Amari was born. They whispered that his love was not just foolish, it was an insult to their way of life. And while Amari's hands shaped dreams of a ring, the village was already shaping his fate, a fate that would test not only his love for Zola but the very strength of their hearts. The night of the harvest celebration was filled with color, sound, and life. The village of Ndala glowed under the light of hanging lanterns, and the air was rich with the smell of roasted corn and sweet palm wine. Children ran laughing between the dancers, and the drums beat like thunder, calling every heart to join the rhythm. Amari stood at the edge of the crowd, his palms sweating, his chest rising fast with every beat of the drum. Hidden deep in his pocket was a small wooden box. Inside lay the silver ring, the ring he had worked for, the ring he had traded away his goats to buy. It was simple but beautiful, shining like the moon, and to him it carried the weight of his entire life. He looked at Zola across the courtyard. She was standing near her father, the chief, her beauty glowing in the firelight. Her smile was gentle, yet her eyes searched for Amari. When their gaze met, the noise of the drums seemed to fade, and the world became only the two of them. Amari's heart pounded harder, and he knew tonight was the night he could not hold back any longer. He had dreamed of this moment for years, and now it was here. He touched the box in his pocket, whispered a small prayer, and stepped forward. The villagers noticed. One by one, heads turned. The laughter softened. The dancers slowed. Amari walked through the crowd, each step heavier than the last, yet carried by love. His hands shook as he reached into his pocket and brought out the little wooden box. The silence grew louder than the drums. Even the wind seemed to pause. Zola's eyes widened as she realized what he was about to do. Amari stopped in front of her. His knees bent slowly, his voice almost caught in his throat, but he held on to his courage. He opened the box and held up the silver ring that had cost him everything, but which meant more than gold or jewels. Around them, gasps spread like fire. To the villagers, it was more than a proposal. It was a challenge, a storm against the traditions they had guarded for generations. Yet to Amari, it was simple. It was love. The drums had stopped. The music had ended. The only sound left was the beating of his heart. His voice was low but clear as he looked up at Zola with eyes full of hope and said the words that had lived inside him for so long. And in that single moment, the night of joy turned into the night that would change their lives forever. The moment Amari reached for the ring, the air in the courtyard shifted. What had been laughter and music only seconds before turned into a heavy silence that pressed against every heart. The wooden box trembled in his hand as he opened it, revealing the silver ring that caught the glow of the firelight. Gasps spread quickly through the crowd, moving from one villager to the next like a sudden storm sweeping the fields. To a stranger, it might have looked like a beautiful scene, a young man bravely offering his heart to the woman he loved. But to the elders seated in their carved wooden chairs, it was not romance at all. It was rebellion. The chief's daughter, standing before everyone, could not be seen wearing the ring of a farmer. It was more than breaking a rule, it was breaking the roots of tradition, tearing at the pride of the whole village. Old eyes narrowed, and mouths tightened. They saw the act not as love, but as betrayal, a public insult that could not be ignored. The chief's face grew dark, his jaw clenched, and his staff pressed hard against the ground. Zola stood frozen, her breath caught in her chest. Her heart wanted to reach out, to take the ring, to choose love without fear. Yet her mind pulled her back, reminding her of her father's power, of the eyes of the village, of the weight of her family's name. Her fingers trembled at her side as if they wanted to lift but could not. Around them, the whispers began, soft at first, but growing louder with every second. Women covered their mouths in shock, men shook their heads, and children clung to their mothers' skirts, sensing the storm that was about to come. What began as murmurs quickly turned into shouts, voices rising like fire catching dry grass. Some shouted Amari's name with anger, others called him a fool. The once joyous courtyard had turned into a place of judgment. Amari remained on one knee, his hand steady though his heart was racing. He looked at Zola, and for a moment, the noise of the crowd seemed far away. His eyes spoke louder than words, pleading for her to see him, not the fear, not the traditions, only him. But the voices around them grew stronger, drowning out the quiet hope between the two. The ring glimmered in his hand, no longer just a symbol of love but now the spark of a battle between the old and the new, between duty and desire. And in that tense silence, before Zola could give her answer, the night broke open with the roar of the village. The celebration that had begun with joy turned dark in a single breath. The moment the silver ring shone in Amari's hand, the elders rose from their seats, their heavy staffs striking the ground like thunder. The sound echoed across the courtyard, silencing every drum, every laugh, every song. Their voices carried with anger as they declared that Amari had brought shame upon the village. The people who only moments ago clapped with him and shared food at his side now stepped back, their eyes sharp and cold. Fingers pointed at him as if he were no longer the boy they knew, but an enemy to their ways. Zola tried to step forward, but before she could reach him, the women pulled her back, clutching her arms tightly as if protecting her from danger. Their whispers cut into her ears, warning her to remember who she was, reminding her that she was the daughter of the chief and could not throw away her blood for a farmer's love. At the same time, strong hands closed around Amari's shoulders. Men who once worked beside him in the fields now formed a circle, blocking him in, their faces grim. The night that had promised him hope was now pressing against him like a trap. Then the voice of the chief broke through the noise, louder than the shouts, deeper than the drums that had fallen silent. He stood tall, his robes swaying in the lantern light, his eyes burning with fury. His staff struck the ground as he roared, "You dare claim what is not yours." His words shook the courtyard, each syllable heavy with rage. He raised his arm, pointing directly at Amari as if casting judgment with a single gesture. "The village will decide your punishment." Gasps and murmurs swept the crowd, their energy no longer festive but dangerous, like fire waiting for wind. Some villagers nodded in agreement, their pride wounded by Amari's boldness. Others looked down, uneasy, but none dared to speak against the chief. Amari stood in the center, his chest heaving, his hand still clutching the little wooden box, the ring inside gleaming softly as if mocking the storm around him. Zola's cries were drowned by the noise as she struggled against the women holding her. Her heart ached to reach him, to stand beside him, but tradition's grip was strong, and fear kept the villagers' arms locked tight around her. The harvest festival was no longer a celebration. It had become a court, a place of judgment, with Amari standing alone before the power of the village. And in that charged moment, the boy who had only wanted to love was now seen as the enemy of everything the elders swore to protect. That night, when the lanterns still burned low and the drums were silent, the council of elders gathered in the chief's courtyard. Their faces were stern, their voices heavy, as they spoke of Amari's crime. They said he had broken the law of tradition, that he had dared to cross the line between a farmer and the blood of a chief. One by one, their words fell like stones. They did not speak of love, only of honor, power, and the rules that had guided Ndala for generations. The decision was made quickly, without mercy. Amari would be banished from the village. His land, his goats, his home, everything he had worked for, would be taken from him. He would leave with nothing but shame. But that was not enough for the elders. They wanted to crush his heart, to show the whole village what happened when love rose above duty. And so they added another punishment, one sharper than any blade. Zola, the woman he loved, would be given to another. The chief had already chosen her husband. Cato, a man of wealth and pride, with arrogance painted on his smile. Cato had long boasted that he deserved Zola, that only he was worthy of the chief's daughter. Now the elders made it law. The word spread quickly through the village. By dawn, everyone knew. Men shook their heads and said it was just, women whispered that it was cruel, and children listened wide-eyed to the story of Amari's fall. For the first time in living memory, the council was not just punishing a man but making an example of him. They wanted every villager to remember that love could not rise above tradition. Amari was dragged before the people, his hands bound, his head held low. Yet his eyes burned with quiet fire as he looked toward Zola. She stood near her father, her face pale but her spirit unbroken. She wanted to cry out, but the grip of the women around her was tight, their fingers digging into her arms. Amari heard the sentence with a stillness that frightened even the guards beside him. His chest rose, but he did not beg. He only stared at Zola, as if trying to hold her with his eyes when the world was tearing them apart. The chief raised his staff high, declaring Cato the future husband of his daughter. The crowd cheered, though the sound was uneasy, broken by murmurs of doubt. Amari's heart ached with pain, but deeper still, a spark of defiance grew. For even as the council thought they were killing love, they were only making it stronger, a fire that could not be buried by rules or revenge. The courtyard was thick with tension as the chief's voice thundered, declaring Cato as Zola's future husband and Amari's banishment final. The villagers waited in silence, expecting Zola to lower her head, to obey as every daughter had done before her. But instead, she lifted her chin, her eyes burning with a light no one had ever seen. She stepped forward, her voice cutting through the heavy air. "If you take Amari," she shouted, her words ringing louder than the chief's staff, "you take me too." The crowd gasped as if the very earth had cracked open beneath their feet. Never in the history of Ndala had a woman spoken against her father, let alone the chief, before the entire village. Mothers pulled their children closer, men muttered in disbelief, and the elders gripped their staffs as if the ground itself was slipping from their control. Zola's voice did not shake, it was steady, fierce, and filled with love stronger than fear. Her eyes never left Amari, even as the guards tried to hold him back. The chief's face turned red with rage. His daughter, his pride, his blood, defying him in front of everyone. His hand trembled as he raised his staff, ready to silence her, but even he knew that striking her now would tear apart his authority. The people were watching, not with anger at Zola, but with awe. Her courage had shaken something deep inside them, something that tradition had long buried. Amari's heart pounded as he heard her words. He had prepared himself for punishment, for exile, but never for Zola's defiance. Her strength gave him strength, and for the first time that night, he lifted his head high, no longer ashamed. He saw hope where there had been only despair. Cato stepped forward, his face twisted with pride and anger. "You dishonor your father," he sneered, trying to turn the crowd against her. But Zola stood tall and replied, "What dishonor is greater than forcing love into chains?" Her words struck harder than any blow, leaving Cato silent and humiliated. The villagers murmured, their voices no longer united against Amari. Some nodded at Zola's courage, others whispered that maybe love was not weakness but strength. The elders shifted uneasily, their plan of revenge cracking apart under the weight of a single young woman's voice. That night, Zola changed everything. She showed the village that tradition could be questioned, that love could stand against fear. And though the chief roared with fury, even he could not silence the fire that had been lit in his daughter's heart. The guards tightened their grip on Amari's arms, ready to drag him into the darkness, while Zola still fought to free herself from the women holding her back. The chief's staff slammed against the ground again, his face twisted with fury, and the villagers waited for the final order that would seal Amari's fate. It seemed the night would end in heartbreak, with love crushed beneath the weight of tradition. But then, a voice rose from the crowd, calm yet powerful enough to silence the chaos. It was Elder Jabari, the oldest man in the village, his back bent with age but his eyes sharp with truth. "Enough," he said, leaning on his staff. The guards froze, and the villagers turned to him. Slowly, he stepped forward, his wrinkled hands trembling but his voice steady. "You forget who this young man is. You forget the blood that runs in his veins." The crowd murmured in confusion, but Elder Jabari raised his hand for silence. His gaze fell on the chief, who frowned, clearly unsettled. Jabari spoke again, louder this time. "Years ago, when the rains failed and the earth gave us nothing, it was Amari's mother who saved Ndala. She gave her grain, her goats, her life so that our children would not starve. The council at that time wrote a decree, hidden in our archives, that her bloodline would forever be honored as protectors of this village." Gasps spread across the courtyard. The chief's face darkened, but even he could not deny the truth of Jabari's words. Several elders nodded slowly, remembering the famine, remembering the woman who had sacrificed everything. Amari's mother had been poor, but her heart had been rich enough to save them all. The guards stepped back uncertainly, their grip loosening on Amari's arms. The villagers who had shouted against him only moments ago lowered their heads, shame burning in their faces. How could they condemn the son of the woman who had once given them life? Some whispered prayers under their breath, others wiped tears they did not expect. Amari stood frozen, his chest rising with shock. He had never known this part of his mother's story. The truth wrapped around him like armor, lifting him from despair. Zola's eyes shone with pride as she looked at him, her heart swelling with hope. The chief tried to speak, but his words faltered. The decree was law, older and stronger than even his authority. Amari was not just a farmer anymore, he was the son of the village's savior, a man whose rights could not be stripped away. And in that single moment, everything changed. The boy they had tried to destroy was now the one they were bound to honor. Amari's hands shook as he opened the small wooden box once more. The silver ring, simple yet shining under the moonlight, seemed to hold all the pain and all the hope of the night. Slowly, he turned to Zola. The villagers held their breath, waiting, but this silence was not filled with anger anymore. It was filled with something new, something heavier than fear, respect. Amari reached for Zola's hand, his fingers trembling, and gently slipped the ring onto her finger. For a moment, time itself seemed to stop. Zola's eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow but of victory. The same crowd that had screamed against them only hours before now stood frozen, their hearts softening as they saw love stronger than every tradition. Then, like a wave, the silence broke. Songs rose into the air, voices joined in dance, drums began to beat again, not in anger but in celebration. The people who had once pointed at Amari now clapped their hands, accepting the love they had tried to bury. The chief stood still, his face shadowed by defeat. He could no longer fight the truth, nor deny the law of the decree. His daughter's hand now belonged to the man he had tried to destroy. His pride was broken, but the village had chosen its path. Under the soft glow of lanterns and the silver light of the moon, Amari and Zola stood together, not as rebels but as symbols of a new story. Their love had not only survived, it had changed everything. From that night, no one in Ndala could ever say love was weaker than tradition. Their ring had written history.